It's awesome to see you. All right. Thanks for being here. My brother, Shasheen Shah. It's so good to see you. You're coming off of a massive ski trip, which we just talked about. Getting ready for another one.
Yep.
And, introduce yourself to my listeners out there. I mean, I could say incredible things about you, but who are you?
Oh my God. Who am I? I'm Shasheen, God, another traveler on this planet, another human being trying to understand and make sense out of this world. How I make my living is, I've been privileged and entrusted as a trusted advisor to an incredible group of people who are, I would classify what as high achievers, people who been to the top of their game and find me along the way. I would argue that that they're coming to me for is to help them make more informed and better decisions. That's what I do, and it's everything from business and strategy to personal relationships, communication, leadership styles, and all of that.
I love it. I love it. How'd you get started in this? I know you because, you and my brother were roommates at Colgate and we just, fell for each other. But how did you get started doing this, becoming an advisor to high achievers? You're a high achiever yourself.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, I grew up in an environment where, I had a family of docs running around. And so I grew up with a lot of people around me that were kind of at the top of their game. And I observed a lot. And there was a lot of pressure as a young kid. I was a kind of classic Indian immigrant's child in a suburb of New York. And, there was an intensity that I grew up with, with the two parents as doctors. And I think along the journey, how I got to doing what I do it was more of a personal journey for myself. I was trying to figure out what was going on. I felt when I was younger, being this only Indian kid in this all Jewish community, I didn't feel like I belonged. I was trying to sort out. I think now in hindsight, I feel like everyone else was going through that, but it kind of set me off on this journey of trying to figure out how to navigate this world effectively. And I think along the way, an interest in business, an interest in people, an interest in strategy, the way my brain worked. If I looked at my strengths and my strengths finder, I was just wired a particular way to understand business and finance and strategy. But the other side of it was kind of this human being that was in the system of business. And over time, what I found was the business part was easy. The strategy was easy. It was a matter of execution, and part of the execution issue was the people involved. And that's what I love about the work that you're doing, and the fact that this conversation that is now elevated. I'm hoping this term of FTE gets eliminated from our vernacular. We're part-time equivalents or full-time equivalents as human beings and how we produce. But that's how I got started. And it was honestly, I hung a shingle and named my company Coherent Strategies, and started working with this, my initial group of people, and it kind of took off. It was a referral. It just became this referral network. It's like, you should go talk to Shasheen. Well, what does he do? I don't know. Just talk to him. You'll either get it or you won't, and it'll either work or it won't. And that's how it started. And it's been going now 20 plus years now, and it's been fantastic.
It's amazing. It is so great. I love it. You hang a shingle, and you said something that's really funny. It's like, go talk to Shasheen. What does he do? Yeah, I don't know. Just go talk to him. I get that. I totally.
How do you explain this? They want ROI. They want, they want to understand what the outcomes are. And I'm like, I feel like people are leaving so much money on the table. And this. This is the work that you do. It's like, what's the difference between an employee that's like sleepwalking and clock punching versus like someone who's truly inspired, where creativity is flourishing, right? How do you quantify that? It's very hard to do up front, but those who get it though, they get it now. I love the fact that conversation's really there on the forefront.
Yeah, it's amazing. Let me ask you this. Why do we humans get in our own way? What do you think? It's a huge, zillion-dollar question, but I think what do you think fundamentally is blocking us from going from good to great and great to exceptional?
So the way in which I talk about it is I think it's just emotional survivability, right? So there's a lot of studies about the biology, the brain and the limbic system and the amygdala and how we go into this fight, flight, or freeze, right? And all of that mechanism and how we take in data through our five senses, kind of goes through that process. And I think that what I've seen for myself, what I've seen for others, and philosophers have talked about this for years. I mean, you have to go to Hegel, you go to all of these, just the early existentialists. There is this crisis of being human and being in the eyes of another person. And I think that we're just trying to emotionally survive everything. We're trying to look good. We're trying to gain admiration. We're trying to I mean, even right now, right, there's a part of my brain that's operating. It's like, make sure you use the right words, make sure you say it the right way, make sure you look good, make sure you're smiling, make sure you're looking at the camera. I mean, that voice inside our head is incessant. So I think that people deal with that part of the human experience in a variety of different ways. And what I've observed is that there's some people who can navigate it really, really well and present really, really well and appear to have it under control and have it together, that will go out and achieve and will go out and accomplish things. And then there's some of us out there that are a little bit more sensitive. They get hooked by it, get confused by it, get self-conscious by it, that haven't developed the skill sets to navigate. And I think that's, for me, the piece that I've been really focusing in on in the work that I've been doing, is that I don't want to create adaptive strategies to like hide that part of me. I want that to just be able to be out there and coexist in the world and just be okay with it. And I think that this adversarial relationship that we have with that part of ourselves is responsible for a lot of the reasons why we end up pulling back, we retract, we fight, we'll flee, and we'll freeze in a lot of cases, and we'll not take that risk. We'll recoil from that opportunity to raise our hand or to put out a body of work or be vulnerable in some kind of way because we want to keep it together.
Yeah. So many gems in there. I mean, so many gems. I think that one thing that you hit on that we know is reality is that we care so much about what people think of us. And I've got a 2-year-old, and I look at her and she has no care about what anyone thinks of her other than herself, which is phenomenal. And I hope that lasts her the next 100 years. I really do. And we know that along the way, something will happen, and something happens where all of a sudden we are presented with someone who says, ew, or I like you, I don't like you. I don't like the way you look. You talk funny. You don't dance right. You dance great. And all of these things start to come into our essence at a very young age. And then what you were saying is eventually, and we know this to be true, we get triggered. Someone in 20 years is going to say to my dear daughter something that triggers her back to a moment in time where she was skiing and she stumbled.
Yes. Or
she was rock climbing and she didn't grab it. And it will come straight back because we're proof in the pudding. It's the trigger, and that's really what you were talking about, the trigger, which then, all of a sudden we're fight, flight, freeze, fight, flight, flee, But talk to me a little bit about this relationship we have to, we'll just call it to suffering a little bit, the soup that we sit in.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's perfect. So, one of the premises that I've just kind of come to over the years is that I think that we underestimate the extent to which our past, those little experiences going back to our childhood, are affecting us in our modern day world. And I've heard everything from horrific traumatic pain and suffering, from sexual abuse to violence to, dad didn't come home one night because he got fired, and the kid didn't get ice cream, and the guy ended up becoming a multimillionaire because of that one instance. And I think the reason why my clients would argue that they keep me around is that it's because there's an understanding of how we kind of got to be the way we are today. And really understanding that, I don't know, I mean, it's, one of my mentors said to me, he's like, you know, Shasheen, you're just not that interesting, right? And I was like, what do you mean you're not that interesting? Like, how much do I pay you? But his point was brilliant, right? He was like, look, he's like, yeah, so you're like the immigrant's two doctor's son. You grew up in Scarsdale, New York, and, you know, poor little kid, you know, got made fun of because he wasn't Jewish, and you came in with a 99 on his exam, and his dad got upset because you didn't know what got wrong. Yeah, I got it, right? You didn't belong, and it's not good enough, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you know, that kind of is running your life, you know, and you're taking things so personally. You're looking at the world through this lens of like having to be right. So there's beauty in the simplicity, and then there's the complexity of like recognizing the depths of those emotional wounds. So yeah, that suffering, that repetition, I think part of the work is, you know, and I think, you know, it's the world of like patterns, right? What he was saying to me, which really kind of stuck with me, it's like, the goal in my mind would be to know yourself so well, know those stories, know the skiing story, know the 99% story, know you raised your hand in class, or know that that part of you is just sitting right there and is so available to you in any situation. And it's, you know, what I find at some point, it's like, it's so predictable, it almost gets boring, right? It's like, oh, there it is again, right? So the work in my mind is to be so familiar with that in a way that you understand the conditions, the situations, the tonalities, the language, the environment, your body, whether you're hungry, tired, whatever it might be, and the conditions under which that part of you is going to show up. Does that, like this?
Yeah, self-awareness. I mean,
yeah. And I get, yeah.
I don't mean to be like, oh yeah, self-awareness, let's move on. Like,
right.
Hello, self-awareness is going to happen today, tomorrow, yesterday, or the last breath that we take. I hope by that time.
But I would add one thing. So I think that self-awareness for me has been, my experience with it over the years has been this kind of self-awareness hell. Like I've done, like since I was a kid, I mean, I walked over coals with Tony Robbins in 1989. I mean, before that, I was like in therapy as a kid and always got ADHD. And he, you know, there was all of these different things where I had labels and it was known, and the immigrant story and my dad's story, it's like almost ad nauseum. Like I was acutely aware of all of the different things and all of the rationale. I mean, I went to, you know, teachers and you know, retreats and you know, these weekend experiences. I mean, even up until my adulthood, I've gone and done all of these different workshops. And self-awareness, I think the only caveat to self-awareness is if the expectation is somehow through self-awareness, it's going to go away. And I think that that's the missing piece, because it's not really popular in the self-help industry to say like, hey, listen, I'm going to make you aware of this and you're going to be dealing with this for the rest of your life. Like people want the quick fix. People want to get, poof, it's over now. I got this part of me. This voice goes away. Somehow it's numbed out. Oh, I'm not going to feel that again. I'm not going to go there again. I want to flip the conversation, be like, no. Get ready. What's inevitable is this week I'm going to get triggered. And I know my triggers. I know what they're going to be. I'm going to feel insecure about something. Finances are going to start looping me around. I'm not going to feel good. I mean, so knowing yourself that way, knowing that what's coming is an opportunity for that to get resolved once again. And that's just what you're going to have to deal with in life. That's really the essence of it for me.
That's amazing. I love it. I love that you flip that, because you're right. The voices are always going to be there unless, like you said, unless you numb them away, or you're finally like, all right, here are the 5 triggers, and one just went away because I've chosen to never rock climb again.
Yes.
I'm never going to put myself in that type of position, which is not what we want. We want to live a fulfilled life.
And an expansive one, right? Yeah. Like, so it's like, is this thought constricting my point of view and my ability to be in the world, or is it expanding my ability to go in the world? Yeah, you can say, I don't like dogs. I don't like fish because ate bad fish one time. I mean, you have all of these preferences. And I think that at least the way I like to live my life is to be really engaged and to be able to be free out there to go experience and do all of these different things. And it's just funny, over time, the walls kind of come in and we get more and more comfortable and oh, I'm 50. I mean, I can't start a new career, but there's actually no logic to that at all, right? I mean, you're just as capable.
Yeah. Oh my God, even more so.
Yeah, right. Right. To your point, absolutely more so.
Yeah.
But, so that's the stuff I think that's on the table in the discovery, and to know oneself in that way. Where this came from for me was years ago. I watched that movie, A Beautiful Mind. You know the movie with John Nash, the mathematician, and he's got multiple personalities, or he's just schizophrenic, right? So in that movie, the punchline in that movie hit me like a ton of bricks, because it shows him, with this debilitating three voices, those three characters. It wrecks his life. He gets, he gets married. It wrecks the marriage. He's got this baby, and then finally it gets so bad, he's like, I'm going to put myself on medication. He puts himself on medication. And this is not whether you should be on medication, not medication, mental health. It's way out of my league. But the metaphor is interesting, is that he ultimately wants to get off the meds because he's literally sitting there like an automaton on this porch smoking cigarettes and doing nothing. And he's this brilliant mind. And so what does he do? He goes on what he calls a diet of the mind. And he learns the fact that these voices cannot be real. And his breakthrough was, boy, that little girl, the little girl in the character, the little girl's one of the characters. She's like, by logic, that woman should be about 20 some odd years old by now, and she's not. And therefore, those voices in my head are not real. And therefore, I should not pay attention to them and take action on them. And so what does he do? He develops a new relationship with the voices that are in his head and goes on to normalize his life with those voices around. They never go away. Yeah. And then the punchline at the end of the movie, after he wins this Lifetime Achievement Award, is his, I think it was the dean of students, goes to him. He's like, so John, how's it going? And the three voices pop up. And, John Nash kind of does little nods to them, acknowledges the fact that they're there, and holds his white hand, and they walk off into the sunset. And it was just the voices hadn't gone away. Yeah. His relationship to the voices had changed. Yeah. And I think that's the work, really. If I were to just say there's one thing that I would love for the listeners or anybody out there to hear, is the work is developing a new relationship with that side of yourself. That's really what it comes down to.
That's beautiful. That's such a great movie. I need to go watch it again.
Oh, I'm telling you. And I tried Googling it. I'm like, is anyone talking about the metaphor about changing the, and it's no, it's just, it's just this thing. But clients of mine, friends of mine, also they rewatched it, oh my God, I feel that's what's going on.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it tonight. I am.
Easy over here. No, but in the best way, right?
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it is brilliant. There's so many things I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
First thing I want to do is I really want to touch on your new book and the title.
Yeah.
I mean, the kid and the king. What is the kid? Who is the king? Tell us more about the book.
Okay. So the title of the book, the working title right now, is The Kid and the King: The Hidden Inner Struggle High Achievers Must Conquer in Order to Reengage and Reignite Life, right? And so the idea is this juxtaposition of the kid and the king was my way of dealing with this duality, right? So the book could have been called "Why Do Really Smart People Do Dumb Things," right? I just couldn't figure out. On one hand, I knew myself to be this very bright, capable individual, and then on the other hand, I found myself to be this incredibly self-sabotaging, just train wreck at times, and acting out in ways that were completely against my self-interest, losing my mind in arguments, getting super emotional, and getting really upset about things, and I couldn't deal with how could both be true? And so part of the analysis in my head, kind of piecing together Psych 101 and philosophy and various different teachers and meditation practice, was well, what if there's just both parts can coexist at the same time? What if there is this kind of childlike version of need that comes out predictably in this need to emotionally survive. So when I find myself in a situation where people are, I'll always be intimidated. People will be better looking or more wealthy or more powerful. My first reaction is going to be like, I don't belong there. Or, if I'm in a situation where there's whatever, just people that are quote unquote bigger, more important, more successful, there's that part of me that will come out that will want to emotionally survive. So today I know that. And I know when I walk in a certain situation, when I go up on stage, when I go to a new client, when I go to a new client meeting, that little kid inside of me that's like, don't be careful, right? It's that survival instinct. That part of me wants to run, wants to hide, will sabotage certain things. And back in the day, it can look like that. It can look like addictions. It can look like all kinds of things, a way to kind of cap off the risk factor or putting myself out there. So that is the nature of the book. And the idea is to come to understand how you got to where you were. What are the components? What are the stories? What is the wiring of your survival instincts, and understanding them? And then from that place, how do you look forward and create from a place of not the past, but from a where do I want to go? And I think that, quite frankly, it's a really hard question. The three questions I ask in coaching are like, what do you want? Why do you want it? And what are you willing to do to get it? And I'm telling you, that's probably the hardest three questions I've ever had to ask myself, or even my clients to have to answer, is because there is so much within that answer that, if not carefully examined, is coming from some level of trying to put ourselves up in this place that will allow us to be, in some ways, I would argue it's some kind of overcompensation mechanism, right? That we're trying to achieve something in this world. So then how do you achieve without overcompensating? Well, it's coming to peace with that, kind of creating some outcomes, doing things because it makes us happy, doing things because if we find joy in it. Those words, I don't think I grew up with an idea that said, what would bring you more joy, Shasheen? Like, what would make you really happy? Well, what would make me happy and bring me more joy would be like people respecting me, loving me, and thinking I was that was the limited thinking. So the kid represents that world, and this king, this queen, there's again, the kid and the king is the kid and the queen. The kid and the king just happened to be the title, but it's this kind of grace, there's this elegance, there's this calm, there's this place that we get. And maybe it's the wisdom to know the difference in the serenity prayer. It's that somewhere in that realm, I think that I at least am striving for, that I feel that is important. So that's the idea, is how do we reconcile this duality? And part of the reconciliation is allowing both to coexist, allowing that kid to be right there, patting him on the shoulder and be like, what's up, little buddy? I got you. We got this. The king's here. And, in the book, there's a bunch of exercises to kind of call that out, bring it forward, do some work around it. I think it's the most loving thing that you can do for yourself.
I love it. And, you may not remember this, but I will say 10, 12 years ago, we had a quick conversation. I was dealing with some, dilemma in my life, a relationship dilemma. And in a nutshell, you shared with me, you said, name that little girl. I gave her some name. It was not Claude, was not my middle name, Amanda, totally different name. Make peace with her. You said, put her in the back of the bus, give her your iPad, and you are the queen, and you are driving that bus. And I remember that to this day, 10, 12 years ago, probably at least.
I forgot that we had that conversation. That's right. Yeah.
And it was that simple that I still use it. And I'm not saying like, okay, it was gone, but I still remember, I would say, if not daily, I remember that at least a few times a week, that she's in the back seat and she's cool. And she's got pretzels, she's got popcorn, she's got everything she needs. Totally. I'm here for her, but I took over. The queen took over. The big me took over. Yeah.
And it doesn't go away. I mean, the kid got me up this morning. I'm like, I didn't sleep enough today. I got to get this thing. I got to get packed. We got to do this call today. My head's running around. It's just like, yeah.
It's constant, but I love what you're saying is the duality, the relationship. We're making, and I don't even know if it's making peace with the relationship. We're just calling it what it is. There's a relationship between our younger self, that little, for me, a very brat, very chicken, and me, my big self, who's like, taking names.
And it comes out with the people that we have the greatest, vested interest in a relationship, right? With our loved ones, with our family, with our intimate partners, like at work, with our coworkers, with our bosses, like, right? It's like when we're so like vulnerable, right? When we have this vested interest, that's where it comes out. And I think going back to that idea of self-awareness, right? I think another thing that I remember hearing from one of my mentors was like, look, Shasheen, you've got this great mind, you've got this ability to articulate the stuff really well. He's like, but awareness isn't going to cut it. He's like, it's time to be responsible for that part of you. And that, I think, has been probably the biggest, where the work is what is being responsible for that duality within us about, and what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? What is knowing that I've got this loaded gun on my hip that if I don't holster, put the safety on and make sure it can frickin' just off the hip, out of the blue, not out of the blue, I would say predictably could show up, but if I'm not responsible for it, it's just gonna go off. My instincts, my knee-jerk reaction, my default, my automatic response system will just fire that off, and often to my detriment and the other person's detriment, not really consistent with an outcome-driven king, someone who is calm, someone who walks with grace, with ease, with joy. Like, that's a different conversation than crush it, go out there, conquer, go do whatever. It's a different realm. So
yeah, I love it. And you just said something that I'm so glad you did, because what I was going to say in the realm of self-awareness, and I love that you talked about a self-awareness hell, 1000%, been there, done that, can go there very easily. But the level of self-compassion and self-forgiveness is something that I think we need to be chugging that water, chugging that water, because we don't. I don't know if and I'm talking the general, we know how to yet like ourselves.
Yes.
And be okay with whatever. Like, I just did a post the other day on burnout, and burnout is real, and I'm in the working world, and it is real. It doesn't matter if you're 23, 54, you got kids, you don't have kids, you're living alone, it's COVID, you haven't touched another person intimately in a while, we're on Zoom all single day. But the fact is, I can admit the fact that I get burnt out too. And what do I do about that? I have to find my own solace in my own way to admit that, first and foremost, as a high achiever, come to peace with that, it's okay, Claude, and then do something about it. What's going to fuel me? And I don't always have the answer, and I don't always know. And it literally could be like looking out the window for 10 minutes. I don't know. But that idea of it's okay. I believe there has to be a softening in all of this understanding, so that we can say, okay, little girl, it's okay to go sit in the back seat. Not get in the back seat. You're good. I got you. Tell me about that.
Oh, that's right. I mean, I think you just nailed it. I mean, so many people, when I'm working with a client, they're new to this, and we start going through it, they're like, I just want to kill that kid. I want to strangle the kid. When I bring the awareness of the two different parts of them, they're just like, holy shit, this is everywhere. I mean, it's everywhere in my life. It's all over the place. And so, yeah, I mean, there's so much in what you said. I mean, I do really believe that, I think how do I say this? This idea of creating self-compassion and self-love, I think that is at the core of the work, right? Because the moment we're able to see that about ourselves, our genesis story, how we got to be the way we are, why we do the things that we do, the mechanism that's at work, and we kind of categorize the mechanism as a human experience, you then have more oxygen in the room to look at others and ask the question, I wonder, what are the conditions under which this person would show up in my life this way? Like, I wonder what's going on there. You become a lot more curious about other people when you have the ability to kind of go there yourself. And I think it's a lifelong journey. I don't think there's an end point of like self-love. I don't think there's an end point until you die. I think we're constantly in this idea of like self-care, this idea of self-awareness, this idea of I think when you said like, you're not getting in the back of the bus, but like, oh my God, there you are, sweetheart. Like you would never, Marianne Williamson did a great talk on this about relationships. And she was talking about this idea of, a spiritual relationship of like two people in love and why they come together. And she mentioned this idea of, if a child came to you with a wound on their hand and they cut their hand, would you slap that child and tell them to go away? I'm like, what the hell are you doing with that wound? Like, how dare you? How dare you show me your wound? Right? And she does this talk about in relationships, in intimate relationships, that some of what's going on for two people is that our wound shows up. Our hurt shows up in those moments where we get triggered, when we display not the best version of ourselves. So for you to be on the other side in the world and watching other people's wounds be exposed all day long, I mean, it seems like in the work that we do, we get to see that. It's like to meet that with a level of curiosity, to meet that with a level of compassion, right? To get there, you've got to be able to see that for yourself first.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways to get there, but yeah, I mean, that's the work.
That's it. That's totally it. So let's go around to the last part of the subtitle of your book, which talks about re-engaging and reigniting.
Yeah.
So are you saying, because I think this is what you're saying, that when you do this work, when you're brave enough to step up and say, hey, I'm interested in looking at who's talking to me on my shoulder, giving her, a box of popcorn and an apple, getting her in the back seat, she's good. And so the big me, the queen, can step up. Is your premise that you do that and you can get reignited, you can find fulfillment?
Yes. And so when people find me, right, when the people end up in my world, these are people, first of all, if they can afford me, right? Like they've done something really well. Like these kinds of my clients have climbed the ladders, they've rung the bell.
Yeah.
And I always say, I'm like, I want you to feel as good as your resume looks, right? I mean, the joy, the satisfaction and fulfillment that should accompany their titles and what they've accomplished in their life, their experience of themselves, their experience of what they've achieved is a mismatch, right? And so what inevitably comes up is, I don't know, the way I'd characterize it, it's almost like and again, this is the non-scientific explanation, but it's almost as if like this crisis is created when we were children about being good enough and lovable and trying to get, the admiration of others. So in our 20s, we get out of school, we go to work, we put our heads down, we go to graduate school, we just charge, we crush it, we go out there. And basically, I think biologically for men, we're just pounding our chests and trying to be the strong person. Successful people are just trying to elevate themselves within the societal structure. And I would say not most of us, I think for the high achieving, whatever you want to call it, it sounds so obnoxious, but whatever, anybody who's producing results, right? What's true is that they've somehow subjugated that part of themselves that's insecure, not what they've developed a strategy that works. And that strategy is like, put it aside. You've heard of compartmentalization. You've heard of just suck it up. We become good boys or good girls, or the other side of it is like the F yous, I'll show you. And there's this fuel that drives people into their 20s and 30s. And then you find your mate, you get married, you have kids. Again, broad generalizations. But at a certain point, you kind of climb up and you look around and you just kind of go, okay, now what? You know, this idea of a midlife crisis, I think, has to do with the fact that the fuel that got you to where you are is not going to be the fuel that's going to get you to that next level. And it is a crisis. It truly is a crisis, because when you, I mean, one of my clients goes like, I've been a dancing monkey my whole life. I mean, I just go on and like someone winds me up, I do my thing and I'm really good at it. And I get paid really well to perform. And somehow there's a group of us out there that get lost in that conversation, and performing is no longer satisfying.
Yep.
And so what's next? Well, that's the idea. When you start to understand your decision-making has been rooted in some of this old kind of wiring that comes back from way, way long ago, stuff about moms and dads and uncles and teachers and football coaches and mentors from when we were young, fueling all of your success, there is this question of like, well, who am I? What do I want? What do you want? Why do you want it? And what are you willing to do to get it? Becomes a very tough question to answer. I know it was true for me. I mean, I didn't know. I was like, I just want people to like me. I just want to get along. I want to make some money. I want my dad to be proud of me. I want the world to just say, hey, he's a good man. You know, he's a good guy. I mean, I want to make $1 million. I want to change the world. I mean, even the do-gooders, right? Even the people that are out there for social justice. I mean, there's a certain element when you break it on down, it's still to get this admiration. So at some point, and again, none of this is bad. It's not good, bad, right, wrong. This is just it's just an understanding of the dynamic that goes on. And so if you can come to grips with that, re-engaging and reigniting with life assumes that you burnt out, you're out of fuel. So what's your new fuel? Yeah. Well, you start to look around and you start to say, what brings me joy? What can I do? What do I want? Well, before you get there, you got to do some cleanup. You know, we got to go through aisle 6 and pick up all the pieces that we left in the wake, and the relationships, and look at and examine some of that stuff. So anyway, yeah, that's it.
You know, you just said something that's so, I missed it until you said it, which is, you know, when you're talking about reigniting, you're out of the fuel. You got to find where you're going to get that propane tank. It's going to come from within, but it's going to come from potentially a different part of where the first propane tank came from, or be motivated completely in a different place. Yeah, I love that metaphor though of reigniting, which means like, oh yeah, I'm out of fuel. I need to like, I need to go find that other, you know, canister.
Well, and we see it. I mean, I see it all the time. It's like you look at people who like, you know, are workaholics and they're busy and all that. Why? Well, you know, a lot of, you know, I'll tell you the biggest place where people suffer on relationships, right? Emotional intimacy gets lost in so much of this, right? Because when we're out there trying to achieve, trying to connect, trying to conquer, trying to crush it, the quality of our intimate relationships, but at least the clients that find me in my life, my experience has been, they end up suffering because, you know, what we have, the mechanism for the feedback loops that we have for feeling good about ourselves, especially if you're in business, if you're a doctor, if you go to work, and by the time you're our age, you're a leader somewhere. You've done good, and people look up to you. People are looking to you for answers. People are looking for, you know, they're looking to you for validation. And then what do? We go home and we're on par, and we don't get that kind of like same kind of reverence. We don't get that same kind of feeling. And so there's this disconnect that happens where, gosh, at work and in these relationships in the office and outside the world, people admire me. Well, why aren't you admiring me? Why? And it gets very confusing. It gets very troubling. And it's a feeling of, I would argue, you end up alone. You end up, I would say that the most common characteristic or experience of life that clients have come to me with is they feel misunderstood, they don't feel seen, they're the last to know, that, you know, they feel like they've got the best intent that's never really recognized themselves. And you're like, oh my God, look at, I mean, I can't believe that that's your experience of the world. I mean, you're so successful. I don't get it.
Right.
And they kind of end up in this isolated bubble that looks really, really great. But it just, I don't know, there's a disconnect there. So
Yeah. Yeah, we need more of you for sure. And we need, I believe we need more, you know, self-compassion, self-forgiveness, and empathy also for what we're going through, but also really what others are going through. Because, and, you know, there's this, every poet has talked about it in some way, shape, or form. Like, you know, be careful what you think about other people. We never know what they're, you know, we never know their journey, that type of thing. And so I think we can't be too quick to, you know, empathy is an overused buzzword. Like, empathy is a feeling, but the way that comes into life is through compassion and kindness.
and I think it's something that takes work, right? Like you have to generate that. Like for me, it doesn't come naturally to just sit and listen empathetically to somebody. It doesn't come naturally for me to come to somebody with a level of compassion. Like I have to like want to, and I have to like make a decision to, in those interactions, to be compassionate. It's an action. It's like I have to be empathetic. Like it doesn't come natural. And to most of my clients, it's not a natural phenomenon. I mean, I think some people are wired that way, and they can, it's more easy, it comes more easily for them. But I will argue that, like, for me, it is a daily practice, of which I'm good at some days, other days I'm not, you know, just walk, you know, I mean, there are moments where, and again, I think that's, to me, that's the tell. The idea of engaged with life is, how engaged am I willing to be? Am I willing to just at the checkout line acknowledge this person that's wearing this mask behind this shield, that she's working there, and thanking them? That's not natural to me. That's not a natural habit. I actually have to decide. I actually have to consciously in the car make it like, okay, I'm going to engage with my environment. I'm going to engage with the people in my life. And I think that is what makes life interesting. That's what makes life fulfilling. And I don't think it's natural. So I don't want people to walk away from this like, oh yeah, just have compassion and love and kumbaya. It's like, no, think about the times that you've been in that situation and the fulfillment that came with that. It's very selfish to some degree, right? It really becomes like, I feel really good and I want to feel really good. I want to feel better and better. Well, that's going to the gym every day, sometimes 3-4 times a day, to be able to build that muscle. So that was the only thing I'd add to that.
No, I totally agree. And I'm so glad you added that, because for me, I naturally skew empathy. That's a very, that's my resting place. You know, for me, I might have to be in the car and psych myself up a different way.
Right.
You know, but like holding space for someone, that I'm very fortunate that emanates through me. But there are tons of other things I need to flex. You know, and I think one thing that you said that was so killer is about vulnerability. In order to do any of this work, and vulnerability, you know, it sounds soft. It's not soft. You have to be willing to just be like, yeah, these 3 things are not going well in my life, and these 18 things are going great, but like these 3 things really matter, and I need to step up to the plate and say, I want more emotional intimacy. I want more of this with my children. I want this, and you have to engage with, you know, whether or not you can do it yourself, great, that's fantastic, but oftentimes it's engaging with someone that can reflect back to you.
Totally.
Yeah. You know, we're close to wrapping up, but you just said something about, you know, engaging with the woman with the mask behind the screen. behind the shield at like a Trader Joe's or something. And, you knew my Nana quite well. And one of the things I talk about all the time is Nana, no matter where we were, and today she would do it tenfold if we were behind masks, she would say, John, because John would have a name tag on at Trader Joe's or whatever. Yes. Would you do me a favor and have a peaceful day?
That's so nasty.
Like, that was just her way of being. It emanated through her. And one of the things you said that I want to really yes, I want to, say, I double that, is it makes us feel good. For those of us that have that, of course it makes me feel good to be more generous. Of course it makes me feel, I don't want to, not here for me. Like, I want to give that out. And I think in many ways, even though you said that empathetic gene might not be your first, second, or third card that you pull, you still want to be able to provide that to other people. We do as humans, we do. It comes out in different ways.
When you said that, it just struck me. It's like, it probably is the first thing I want to do, right? But it's like, there's so much stuff that's stacked on top of that. It's like that, if I'm not responsible for that, if I'm not ready to pull away all of my selfish, narcissistic thoughts about God knows what in futures that haven't even occurred yet. If I'm not conscious, if I haven't meditated that day, if I haven't quieted myself, if I haven't looked out at nature, if I haven't done that stuff,
yeah,
the likelihood is I'm probably not going to be as engaged and have that. And this is the key, that experience of life. That's what it is. It's an experience of life.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, my God, the people that I work with, I mean, my goodness, I still have them on pedestals. I mean, they're incredible human beings doing great things. But if you hear their experience of life sometimes, it's like, wow, I don't know if I'd trade places some days.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's at the core of this work and in the work that you're doing, Claude. And I love that you're just bringing all of these conversations to the forefront. It's so needed. It's so, I love it.
All right, before we close out, I would love to know how you would explain or define emotional optimism.
So, let's just take out what emotional optimism isn't, right? It's not some Pollyanna, let's sprinkle magical fairy dust on stuff and just pretend like problems don't exist. I think emotional optimism, to me, is a decision to be responsible for the interpretations of the world that we live in, the data that's coming in, and being responsible for this, in my language, the kid and the king and the duality, and live inside rather than the fear and the survivability and emotional survival that we kind of tend towards, to make a choice, to develop a new relationship with the world, to develop a new relationship with discomfort, with things that don't feel good, as an opportunity to to learn, to develop, to grow, to kind of go through the world with a little bit of more curiosity rather than an automatic conclusion about, oh God, it's, it seems like impending doom is one option and positivity is another, right? And somewhere in between there is just a level of just hey, let's put this into perspective. I think that's what I would say it is.
I love it. Thank you. I'm so stoked we had this opportunity. I was thinking of so many other things, ideas we could do, what you're providing to this world, and the way you break it down is very simple, very digestible. And it is not asking someone, what I like is it's not necessarily asking someone to change. It's to identify, realize, recognize, as John Nash did, and move through that, move with that. You haven't asked, in this conversation, you haven't said, so you're an empath, Claude, you should absolutely start to be more left brain. If you want to find fulfillment, that's not what you're talking over here. It's truth. It's truth. So All right. So where can people find you? Like where on social? You have a website. Where can people find you?
You know, the easiest way is go to my name, Shasheen.com. And this is a new world for me of like on the website. So I think by the time this goes live, there will be links to the book, Shasheen.com/book. Shasheen is my Instagram. Shasheen is, I guess with the name like Shasheen, all you got to do is type it.
I think it's pretty cool.
SHASHEEN.com. Just go there.
Amazing. I thank you for spending time with me and everyone else.
We're going to do it again. I know.
We're going to do it again. Yeah.
I love
Thanks.
it.
Bye.